Hello, it's John Heaton. Today I'm going to re-look at the classic album from 1972 from the Rolling Stones, Exile on Main Street. And before I start, someone commented on a recent Stones video I did saying I looked bored when I was discussing the Stones, and it's not obligatory to review them. Well, I'm sorry if I gave that impression. I'm not bored, it's just my style maybe, but anyway, I love the Stones. I love most of their work, particularly up until To You. 1981, and this Exile on Main Street is one of my all-time favourites. Just a bit of background, it was not intended to be a double. They left England for tax reasons, hence the title Exile. Main Street is a street in Los Angeles which they tagged on and made the title later, but they went to the south of France and hired a house, or Keith hired a house in a little town called Villefranche on the coast, just a couple of miles from Nice. And because they couldn't find a suitable recording studio, they ended up recording quite a few of the sessions for Exile there. They did leave France in the autumn of '71 and then finished off the album in Olympic Studios in London and also Los Angeles, where a lot of the post-production was done. But Villefranche is probably where the spirit of the album is, and it's probably no coincidence that Keith sounds more involved on this album than he did on the next few. He was in the middle of his heroin phase at the time of this album, which probably affected his ability to function properly and attend all of the sessions, but he wasn't the only one who wasn't very good at attending sessions, because apparently Bill Wyman didn't like the atmosphere at Villefranche at the Keith's house, and so skipped quite a few of the sessions. And in fact, he's only credited on 8 of the tracks, but he says in an interview that he was on more than that, so that's not correct. But I'll show you some of the credits that are included in the original packaging, because I picked up a nice copy of the original album the other day, because I managed to lose my original album over the years. Must have lent it to someone. Must point out that the original album came with a set of postcards, and the copy I found the other day doesn't have that, and the new vinyl, rather disappointingly, doesn't have that either, which I thought was a bit lazy. But the new vinyl doesn't have the zip on the cover of Sticky Fingers either, no doubt for financial reasons. But anyway, so I'm going to show you this copy, very nice copy, good condition, Yugoslav copy, with the album opening like this as it did, with the albums being housed inside the inside here. And I was very pleased to get a copy of this, because as I say, I lost my other copy. And the green writing is restored here, or sorry, this is from the original, because the new vinyl disappointingly gets rid of that green writing. It's just black writing. So good to have the original with the credits of who performed on which track. So it's the basic Stones lineup here on the top, and then whoever contributed an additional instrument or played a particular instrument on a particular track is credited there. And among the people who contributed, other than the 5 Stones, which was during the Mick Taylor period, by the way, he was on guitar, Charlie on drums, Bill on bass, Mick and Keith. We've got Bobby Keys on sax, we've got Jim Price on trumpet and trombone, Nicky Hopkins on piano, Billy Preston playing piano and organ on a couple of tracks, Bill Plummer playing upright bass, Keith is playing bass on a couple of tracks I noticed, such as Casino Boogie, and we've got Ian Stewart playing piano on quite a few tracks, and a whole set of backing vocalists, Clydie King, a lady called Vanetta, Jenny Kirkland. And I should say that was one of the things which is nice about this album, is there's seemingly a chorus of mainly female backing vocalists on tracks like Let It Loose and Tumbling Dice, those 2 in particular, I think, which lends the kind of album quite a gospel-y feel, and I really love that. Again, I'm not sure how many of those backing vocals were laid down at the sessions in France or were overdubbed in Los Angeles. Al Perkins guests on the slide guitar for Torn and Frayed, and Jimmy Miller, the producer, plays percussion on a couple of tracks and actually plays the drums on Happy. So, and this is the original side 3 and 4, and it's on the Yellow Stones label with Made in Yugoslavia clearly written. So it's in good condition, and I did notice that the new vinyl, they've lazily misprinted the front cover so that this picture here is repeated here, which I think is just an oversight. Again, I think that's quite lazy, because on the front cover of here, you've just got the picture appearing once here, and it's just slightly a little bit out of skew on the new edition. And as I say, they didn't come up with the postcards, so I think not top marks for Universal for that repackaging. So I've talked about the musicians, and whether this is their finest hour, I don't know. It's a matter of opinion. I know you, Dave Costello, think Goat Set Soup is the highlight. Some people prefer Beggar's Banquet. Some people prefer Sticky Fingers. For me, it's a toss-up between Sticky Fingers and this one, but I'm going to go for Exile at the moment, because as soon as I got home, having bought this superb original copy on Sunday, I literally managed to make it through more or less the whole album. I think I got interrupted after Shine a Light, so I made it through 3.5 sides. It's a relatively short double album, 67 minutes, if you compare that to the Beatles' White Album, which was 91, which makes, that's quite a long album to sit all the way through. But this one is more manageable, 67. And these days, obviously, CDs come in at over 60 minutes on a regular basis, but this was a brave double album at the time. And actually at the time, even though it did get to #1 in the US and the UK, and #2 in Canada, I think, it wasn't particularly well received by the critics. They thought it was a lazy cover. They thought it was a bit of a messy sounding record, but over time it's developed a reputation, and if it's not their finest hour, it's pretty damn close to it. And I'd say it's their greatest rock and roll hour. I think they're at their top form rock and roll wise on this album, and I include Sticky Fingers in that, because there's almost no let up on this album. Whereas on Sticky Fingers, you've got a couple of softer moments like Wild Horses and I Got the Blues and Moonlight Mile. But on here, it's almost all pretty hard rock, and you have got a few lighter moments and a few moments to break up to make more variety. I think a couple of things to mention about this album is the opening track. There's a few contenders out there for the best opening track from the Stones: Brown Sugar, Gimme Shelter, Sympathy for the Devil being the other three, probably. But I would, push comes to shove, I'd probably go for this one, primarily because it's not so well known, didn't find its way onto any compilations such as Made in the Shade or Time Waits for No One. And if you crank this up loud, I think it's absolutely brilliant. And the words are great, even though Mick does his normal good job of obscuring the words so you can't really hear what he's singing. But lines like "The sunshine bores the daylight out of me," I think are just classic, because they were night owls at the time, and Bill was saying that they worked from between 10 in the evening and 3 in the morning most days, and then probably stayed up partying. And then, as you do, if you're living in Villefranche, you get up and you go for brunch in Monte Carlo, because it's just a couple of miles down the coast. So that's the kind of life they were living. It must have been quite pleasant, although they did get burgled where they were staying there, and some of their guitars were stolen. But yeah, Rocks Off is an extremely strong opener to the album. In fact, side 1 has to be one of my favourite sides of all time from the Stones, because it opens and closes with 2 of my favourite ever Stones tracks, Rocks Off and Tumbling Dice. Tumbling Dice being a superb, slowly chugging single, which they tend to do too fast in concert over the years. But on this particular album, it's just sensational. And Charlie's drumming, or maybe it was Jimmy Miller helping out on the drums for that track. But tremendous musicianship, and as I say, they got the tempo spot on. But side one also includes Rip This Joint, which is a storming rocker, and then a couple of fun tracks like Hip Shake, which is a kind of involving Mick Jagger playing harmonica, and then, is it harmonica? Yeah, harmonica, Ian Stewart on the piano. And then Casino Boogie is a bit of a throwaway track, it would appear, but it's a very decent throwaway if it is. I mean, it's what I love about this album is I think it's the best example of Mick and Keith singing in harmony more or less on every track. And on a track like this, Keith's high harmony voice works really well, and I wouldn't be without it. It's a bit like some of those White Album tracks, which some people say, you know, should have been dropped. I don't think this album should have dropped anything, and I don't think the White Album should have dropped anything. It's just one of those things about double albums. It has its highs, it has its middle ground, and it has a certain amount of what could be described as filler, but that's a little bit harsh because these tracks are really quite moody. And we'll see that again on side 3, which is probably the dark horse of this album. On paper, a couple of the tracks don't hit you immediately, but once you get into the groove, like I was playing them extremely loud last Sunday, and Turd on the Run and Ventilated Blues are very strong pieces of work, and Happy is a great opener for side 3 with Keith doing a roaring vocal, and then Let It Loose closing the side with those glorious gospelish backing vocals. And then side 2 I haven't talked about, but what a masterpiece. Sweet Virginia is the closest we get to a ballad on this album, but it's a kind of country number, and it's just hilarious, ending with the line, got to scrape the shit right off your shoes. And great sax solo in the middle, and great harmony vocal from Keith on the chorus, love it to bits. And then side 2 continues with Torn and Frayed, which is just a tour de force. I absolutely love it. Crank this one up loud. Mick Jagger was complaining that this album was not well produced. He says it's very rock and roll, and then he kind of went on to say he prefers more experimental stuff. And they were to experiment more on Goat's Head Soup, and it's only rock and roll. But when it comes to straight rock and roll, a track like Torn and Frayed, crank it up loud. And I don't think it's badly mixed at all. I think the drumming is brilliant. And Black Angel is a great little track in the middle of side 2 here, written about Angela Davis, the black activist, and a great sort of jungle rhythm in that track. Brilliant. And then Loving Cup, just an album track to die for. Again, not found its way onto any compilation, no greatest hits, but what a masterpiece. And when Charlie's drumming comes in halfway through that song, it's just absolutely spellbinding. And so that just leaves me to talk about side 4, which is again pretty sensational from all down the line. Could have been a single, really. It's a bit like Silver Train. It's a little bit generic, but it's fun, and it's play this one loud. Jimmy Miller is playing percussion on it. And then Stop Breaking Down is got Ian Stewart on it, and it's a very funky number. Shine a Light has a gorgeous piano intro from Billy Preston, who then comes in on the organ, so that must have been overdubbed. And then this is a kind of gospel-y number, and works really well. Soul Survivor chugging, great closer to the album. So yeah, what else have I got to say? Yeah, as I said, Keith was going through his heroin phase, so he was having some drug dealer or some delivery guy travel to Marseille on the train, come back with huge bags of heroin, which they kept in the house. So by all intents and purposes, to all intents and purposes, a lot of drugs available at these sessions, probably drink and food as well. So I'm not sure how much that affected the productivity, but in terms of creativity, in terms of songs and performances, along with the post-production they did in Los Angeles, I think this album is an absolute masterpiece. And it did come in on this 1987 Top 100 Albums from Paul Gambaccini. It came in at number 11. And Paul writes, when informed that Exile on Main Street was the highest placed Rolling Stones album in our poll, Bill Wyman remarked with irony that it had received the roughest reception of any Stones album at the time of release. It set itself up for the obvious criticism of all double albums that it would have been better had the best tracks been distilled onto one disc. There were remarks that the sleeve was particularly obnoxious, featuring a gallery of freaks in passport quality photos and the Stones' name only in a handwritten scrawl. Though a number one in both the US and the UK, Exile stayed near the top for a shorter period in time than its predecessor, Sticky Fingers, and Tumbling Dice, the lead single, did nowhere near as well as Brown Sugar. So what say today's critics? Exile is one of the Stones' grittiest albums, with some of their hardest rockers and plenty of bad boy attitude to go round. Turd on the Run, Ventilator Blues and Rocks Off showed that they were not ready to clean up their act. Besides, this record contains Keith Richards' best vocal performance, Happy. To quote Wolfgang Doberling, who a lot of the critics gave their top 10 albums of all time, which were used to compile this top 100. And this particular guy had 4 Stones albums in his top 10, including Exile at 1, Sticky Fingers at 2, and then it also in the top 10, Beggar's Banquet and Some Girls. So according to him, Exile had emotion and style, beauty and sleaze, depth and glamour. In short, pure genius. Well, I think after that's the beauty of picking up a decent copy of an album. You go back and you replay it and you just get back right into it. And last year I had the same experience with Goat's Head Soup in rediscovering that album. And here I am singing the praises of Exile for you guys again, because I've done it before, but I'm not ashamed to repeat myself. Thank you for watching. I'll see you next time.